Eros is a poem incarnate. It's the essence of it all. And because of that is at the core of mystery. It's in the middle of God. And every effort to capture it and quantify and define it is going to be not enough, right? Eros is the animating principle of life itself, right? The eros is the quickening. Eros is aliveness, and I'm very careful. Is not synonymous with pleasure, right? Eros is aliveness, and the impediment to eros is not pain; it's resistance.
Welcome to the Somatic Pleasure Podcast, where the body is the teacher and sensation is the path. I'm your host, James Humecky. This is a space where breath slows, skin listens, and we enter the raw, unfiltered currency of intimacy, desire, and embodied truth. This space isn't sanitized, it's real. Some of what we touch on may be explicit and not suitable for children. So, if you're ready to feel all of it, come on in. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Somatic Pleasure Podcast. And today I get to sit down and talk to this lovely woman, Kirstin Hotelling Zona. Okay, I'm gonna actually want to figure out where that name came from. That's a great name. Who's coming to us from the East Coast, and Kirstin is coming at us. She's a tenured professor that moved into a master life coach and is going to be running a women's sex retreat. And I know that sounds a little intriguing and vague, and we're going to find out more about it here. So, Kirstin, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, James. Thank you. It's great to be here.
So you're in Maine right now? Is that where
I'm in Maine, where I grew up. Just moved back here. Yes.
I'm thinking about that because I'm here in Central America.
Yes, right? I know. I'm trying to both welcome that in and block that out because it's snowy and dark right now.
Two wonderful places. I mean, personally, I grew up in Alaska, so I'm really familiar with that. It feels very much like home, and I miss it to a certain extent.
I love Alaska. Where in Alaska did you grow up?
I grew up on the Kenai Peninsula. If anybody doesn't know that,
I've been there.
Yeah, it's directly south of Anchorage. Seward, Kenai, the whole.
Yes, I lived there for a summer and a fall, actually, in my tent doing the fish thing.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, this is there's that and actually I want to get back to this, but first I just want to have you. So you were a tenured professor. You're an author. You're a published author, and you were in what seemed to be, from all the readings that I've done of your bio and whatnot, in pretty comfortable life, and things were going along pretty darn well, and then there was a shift.
Yeah.
And what brought you into life coach and various other things. And I'd like to hear a little bit about that journey for you, where you came from and how'd you get here?
Thank you. Yeah, so I was a tenured professor. I was a poetry professor, poetry and literature, for 25 years in Illinois. And my interest in poetry and my interest in literature was really a response to an original major and focus in psychology. So as an undergrad, I was first an artist, and that was my earliest identity. And then I was always just super fascinated with the human condition. And I went into psychiatry and psychology thinking I would be a psychologist. And in the advanced courses, and I was really good at it, I loved it. But the farther and deeper we got into the discipline, the more diagnosis was centered. And it became clear that at least conventional psychology was really rooted. It began with with diagnosis. And from diagnosis, we went into lots of categorizing based on the path of diagnosis. And this felt really at odds with what compelled me always about the human condition, which is our aliveness, like what we now call eros. And so becoming increasingly frustrated with that discipline, I'd always been a poet and an artist, and I loved writing and reading. And I was kind of, I was always taking lit classes. And so I moved into at the very 11th hour, like the end of my junior year, I became an English major, and uh, which I'd sort of been anyway. Um, and that's because art and literature and poetry, they take root, right? Their launch is not diagnosis and what we can catalog, but what exceeds, right? What bleeds out, what exceeds, what refuses, what both summons our attempt at sense making and then foils it at exactly the same time. And so I found a great home there, and finished up with an English degree and wrote a thesis and all of that, and took a couple years off, went up to Alaska, and and then went to grad school and really focused on poetry because poetry seemed to be the place where that tension was most alive. Like our attempts at meaning making foiled constantly, right? And I would always say to my students, let confusion be an invitation, not a problem. and through my love of poetry, I eventually ended up as a professor of poetry, both an author of poetry, an editor, and a scholar of poetry. But my interest in the poem was always fundamentally an interest in eros. It was always how can we become more alive? How can we widen the aperture and hold more of this thing we call life? The whole spectrum. And so the poets are my great teachers. And about, I don't know, 15 years into my profession as an academic, my marriage, well, it had been unraveling for a while, but it started to unravel at a pretty, pretty rapid pace. And lots of things were coming undone at that time. And as that was happening, I hired a life coach. Now, I will just say that to me at that time, a life coach sounded like the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. I was like, what? I was totally embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, I can't. But I'd try, I'd been in therapy and I'd done millions of healing modalities and shamanistic things. And finally, my best friend had hired a coach and was really loving it. And she said, just come with me to this event. And I was like, oh, God, all right. And by the end of the day, I'd hired her and I worked with her for 4 years. I was certified. My first certification was with her. Her name was Karen Fagan International. And so I started a coaching practice about 7 or 8 years before I left academia. And so for my last, almost 10 years in academia, I ran a business as a coach, and I was also going up for tenure and got tenure and ultimately developed a class called Narratives of Human Potential, which was this sweeping, amazing course. It was so great. And I got to teach it in a huge lecture class, and I got to teach it in little tiny seminars. And that really bought me time in academia. That was the isthmus that I felt at home at for the last, several years, so that I could not feel completely out of alignment. So I taught that course, which was marrying my worlds. And then ultimately so much has happened in higher ed, but I I just knew it was time. Yeah, you're right. It was very, very, very comfortable. It was I taught 2 classes one semester. I taught 1 class another semester because I was an editor of a major poetry journal. But, I took the leap because aliveness is what I'm always pursuing. and and I knew there was something more and there's something scarier. And so here I am.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, thank you for sharing all that, because that journey from the academic world, and then like, kind of what we're supposed to do or how you're
Mm,
supposed to go up in life and what is success. And, I mean, I was reading some of your stuff, and then these are some of the things you're talking about. People that have these,
yeah,
wonderful, and they're not bad lives. They're wonderful lives, but they
exactly.
a sense of deadness inside.
Yes.
And, that question that it's interesting that you said that the way you did, that you knew that there was always something more. Because I
Mhm.
remember as a kid, like, I'm like, God dang, there is something other than this. I mean, there's a better way to live.
Right?
You gotta need to do it,
Yeah.
bringing in the poetry piece because what did somebody say? The language of the revolution is going to be poetry. The beautiful thing about poetry is it's so much metaphor, and it's a way of just
Mhm.
it's like chewing on
Mhm.
thin words. It's
Mhm.
very open and alive and ecstatic
And embodied,
and
right?
embodied. Yeah, exactly.
So profoundly embodied, and that's what was so fun to teach about it, because people learn to hate poetry because teachers teach it as a code to crack, right? But if we can bring our whole bodies to the poem, Coleridge used to say, "The poet brings the whole soul of man into activity,"
I love
right?
it.
Like, it calls the whole body in, and that's what gets left out these days.
Right. Well, I mean, and there's so much going on in our brains, in our minds, in our thinking, right? I mean, there's so much, and as soon as we coalesce it into words, as soon as we come
Yeah.
into words, I mean, it just kind of it's taken this huge field and gone like this with it. You know what I
Yes.
mean? But poetry feels to me, it always felt like to me that there's it 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 kind of maintains some of that depth and that breadth,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
yeah, you're not going, sentence structure and the right word. You're just
Yep.
cookies could mean anything, that.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
But you did talk about, you did bring up, the sense of eros and
Mm.
aliveness. And I think I agree with you. I'm pretty sure I do about what that is. And so
Mm.
I'd like you to talk a little bit about what is eros and that aliveness. So, usually when you say eros, people go immediately to sex.
Sex. Yeah.
And then when they think sex, they go immediately to intercourse.
Yeah.
That's just like this.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
And we know that it's much bigger than that. So yeah, let's
Yeah.
hear a bit about
I
your
love it. I love it. I love it. And, thank you for asking this question, because I think it's such a great question. And, what is eros? What is that aliveness? What is eros? And I will offer you an answer, that I hope is as much a conversation with you as an answer. Um, but I offer my caveat to the answer is that, I don't, it's sort of like a poem, right? Like, eros is a poem incarnate. It's it's the essence of it all. And because of that is at the core of mystery. It's in the middle of God. And every effort to capture and quantify and define it is going to be not enough, right? So that's the caveat. So, eh, so
yeah.
my answer to, next week or last week might be different than it is today, because it is the question that guides my life. Like, what is this aliveness? What is eros? So there's so many ways to answer it, but I would say eros is the animating principle of life itself, right? That eros is the quickening. Eros is aliveness, and I'm very careful. And I love this about your work too. This is one of the reasons I was so drawn to your work. um, eros is not synonymous with pleasure, right? Eros is aliveness, and
Mhm.
the impediment to eros is not pain; it's resistance. And you know, I know we'll get into all of this, right? But to me, eros is that aliveness. And then the practice becomes, okay, how do we soften? How do we navigate the resistance that we've learned to adopt, to pull on, in thinking we need it as self-protection? Sometimes we do. But how can we become ever more alive? Because I think the more deeply we're inhabiting our aliveness, the more deeply we are, and fully we remember ourselves home to source. to God, to goddess, to nature, to universe, to whatever it is your word is for the great weave, the great mystery, which is what I'm always after, right? I mean, and it's only been in the last, few years of my life that I've even come to understand my interest in eros as ultimately a spiritual quest.
That's beautiful. I mean, that, yeah, eros is not something that's easily nailed down. It
Mhm.
really isn't.
Thank
And
God, right?
there you go. Yes, thank God. Yes, exactly.
In all senses of that word, right?
It's the word, it is a poetry, right? The sense of it is a poetry. And I also liken it to dance.
Mm,
You're in a dance with somebody, with something. It could be any kind of dance, wrestling or salsa, or just being funky on the dance floor, because you're working with those polarities, is what it feels like. You're working with
mm,
all the pieces. You're not working towards an end goal. You're working within what is present at the moment. And this is the way I see
yes, I
it.
love that.
Like, it is just, and that it's that ugh of life, right? It's
Exactly. Yes, yes,
like,
yes.
when you want to take a baby, like you want to fight them just because they're
Right, you
just.
wanna eat 'em. Yeah,
We were all cannibals in some
yeah.
level. But that is the thing. And what I've seen, and I know that within myself too, it took me a long time to kind of get to this place of
Yeah, yeah,
some sort of understanding and comfort with sort of the great unknown, that
yeah.
force that is both wanting to destroy you and create at the same time.
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
just like this. It can be this weird, twisted kind of oh shit kind of thing, or it can be this like this ecstatic, and to
Mhm.
bring people in, give them the tools so that they can actually ride that
Yes.
moment in those times. And this is what I
Yeah.
see your work is that. And I mean, your academic background, your teaching background really, I think, brings a next level to this work. To be honest, when I look at your work,
Mm.
when I've listened to it, and when I hear the videos and whatnot, um, and then not to compare really, but we're comparing. You have a lot of people that jump into this because they have a feeling
Mhm.
and they have
Mhm.
an experience, and then they just want to, like, you know evangelize that out all over the world, but they don't have the
Mm.
words. They don't have the depth
Mm.
of experience and the communication skills that I see with you. So I'm
Um,
just
thank you.
saying that I super appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, and it's nice to hear that too because, in some ways that leap from academia to facilitating sex retreats, just for instance. To me, inside of my own body and my own experience, that trajectory feels very organic. And I can point to all the ways in which this led to this, led to this. And I can see, the roots here and the branches here, and it all is of the same tree. But sometimes, one of my ongoing challenges is niching. I'm actually not fond of it. Um, when I work with people, I tend to say, okay, we're gonna actually it's anti-niche. How much of you can we actually bring into the picture? Because the more of ourselves we can embrace, we can trust that the pattern of who we are will emerge. You don't have to go seeking your essence. Bring all of you in and your essence will emerge, right? It just
Mm.
organically does. But in the world of business and marketing and promotion, making sense of for others my trajectory from academic to this doesn't always feel smooth. So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you, and giving me the chance to talk about it.
No, it is definitely not a smooth transition.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, if you've run into this much with that transition, but how people view you, how they're
Mhm.
taking that information, like, what the heck, here's this intelligent academic, you look kind of conservative, you look, you're from the East Coast. There's all these, kind of labels that we lay on people, that just like, well, you don't look the part. kind of a,
Well, I got my winter clothes on. When I'm in Mexico, I look a lot different.
but I mean, anyway, that's a whole other line of a conversation. But the because we live largely in kind of puritanical culture,
Mhm.
and there's been a huge amount of repression and suppression and actual punishment of things
Mhm.
that are erotic, whether they're
Oh, yeah.
taken sexual or not, just that
Mhm.
liveliness. The witches were burned,
Mhm. Yeah,
people were.
9 million of them. Mhm.
So, how have you navigated that piece for yourself, or have you even experienced much of it?
The sort of censure around eros and
Sure,
sexuality
or people looking at you with
versus
judgment, or
Mm.
have you
Oh,
had?
well, that began really early. It's been my whole life. I have always been deeply sensually embodied. The sex retreat actually rose out of a different retreat I was doing called Wild and Free. And we were talking about something entirely other than sex. And somebody at that retreat said, Kirsten, when are you going to do a sex retreat? You just have to do a sex retreat. And she said, you're just the way you embody sensual sexual energy outside of the forums we think of as sexually sanctioned forums, right? The way that you weave so-called sexuality into life as a whole, eros, that I want more of that. And so I say that not to be like, oh, but to just say, like, for me, you know, I suppose the first experience of that censure was my mother, as
Mm.
I'm sure it is for so many of us, because she experienced that too. I'm sure much more than I did. But to be, so I can think of a lot of answers right now, but to keep it sort of
Yeah.
on track, very young, I was sensually, sexually embodied. As a girl wanting to go to certain places and hang out in certain places. I mean, I remember my mom saying, "Oh, well, if you were a boy, you could do that, but you can't as a girl." And
Wow.
so
Right.
that ignited that was my first encounter with Sekhmet, and the great goddess of love, justice, and war. Um, but I have an inner fire. And so my whole life, I mean, I was expelled from school. I've got so I may look a little conservative, but I hardly am. And so I've
You're
been dealing with that for a
you're
long time.
big
And
part.
I see other people's judgment, or, you're too much or whatever. When I don't even, when I do encounter that, I don't take it personally. I experience that typically as a cultural wound, and then I feel a lot of compassion for people often when they judge, let's say other women, judge other women as overly sexual or as somehow immodest or whatever. I feel compassion
Well,
mostly.
brings up another question too, that because I've had friends and clients and whatnot, like I just think of one particular moment when somebody was talking to me and they said they told their husband that they wanted to go to a sex retreat. It was something similar to what you're doing, somebody else. And, their husband got really mad and kind
Mm,
of
mm,
jealous and kind of like, well, why would you want to do that? And, what about
yeah,
me? Well, that kind of stuff.
yeah.
So how would you guide somebody through that moment when they're feeling that expansion, that desire to move into this eros place and
Yeah.
meet with that kind of feedback resistance?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And, I've often had clients say to me, even clients who come to my 1-day retreats say, my husband is so nervous
Mhm.
I'm coming to this. Like, am I going to quit my day after this? Am I
Well,
going
you know,
to am I gonna, but and I think the question and the circumstance that gives rise to your question is a great illustration of why you and I are doing the work that we're doing. Because so often, so let's just say that husband who got angry, that husband, I don't know exactly, but let's just use him as an example, right? We are taught that, first of all, we're taught that eros, as you said in the beginning, right? The eros is really reducible to sex, or let's just say sexuality. And sexuality is reducible to sex. So we take this great animating principle of life, like fundamental creative life source energy. We constrict it to sex. Then we narrow it, we reduce it to sex. Then we shame sex and we silo sex so that sex is something we source in secret often or in private, and usually in certain sanctioned relationships and context, and through another,
Right.
through another. So we've learned, so it's this wild thing, right? Where sexual energy, erotic energy is the seat of our creative life force, which is also to say the conduit, the channel to our greatest contribution in this lifetime. And yet it is the thing that we have been taught is out there, right? We activate it, we find it, we seek it, we get it out there. And men often, we're all taught this. This is the water we all drink. And so I think men often assume, men as as leaders and I mean that in the primal, beautiful way, right? Can often feel really threatened inside of this cultural narrative when their partner wants to, um, feels that kind of that hunger for more. My ex-husband felt very threatened by this as well. Like feels that call to more. Like, what's wrong with me? How have I not? Am I lacking in some way? How am I not satisfying you? When I think a much more helpful way for both partners to understand the situation is that, you know, maybe the relationship is safe enough for her to even feel the call in the first place.
Mm.
And the call being her own erotic current, which can never be sourced from another. It can be shared and expressed and amplified, but never truly sourced from another. And so what I would say to them both, and I just did a custom sex retreat for two
Mm.
in celebration of a couple's anniversary. And and so this is a very recent conversation I had where, I talked about how when we cultivate individually, we reclaim our erotic energy as our own, which involves, you know, like actual literal teachings and then somatic practices and deprogramming and reprogramming. And it's such a beautiful process. But when we reclaim that erotic sexual energy as our own, oh, right, then we can go, then where we go together, that's a whole third dimension. That's a whole other place than when we're sourcing what's really impossible to source from one another. So to that man, I would say, oh, you just wait. You'll be so happy. And to
Right.
her, I would say, this is not a betrayal. This is a reclamation of your sovereignty, which is not to say autonomy. This is the reclamation of your own life force and life source. And it is through that reclamation that you can come back to your partnership, and inside of your partnership, infuse it with a kind of life that we can't. We reach a limit, right? Until we do this work internally to come back to eros ourselves.
Coming back to eros. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
How did you answer that question?
what's that?
How did you answer that question when
Well, very similarly, it's that, we well, thank you for asking. Your interview.
I know,
Um,
I know.
no, but yeah, that sense of like, if we both can access this place, think of how much more we can experience
Yeah.
ourselves. But first, I have to know how to do that within myself,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and or you need to, this is what you need to do to learn how to do that within yourself. And so the explanation being like, the more that I can access that, the more that I can be available and
Yeah.
connected to you because I have more of the language. I have more of the sensation. I understand better what's happening in my body,
Mm.
allows me to really discern what my yes is, what my no is, what my
Mm.
desires are, and generally speaking, to slow down.
Yeah.
Love that you're doing this work with women, and that part of the reason why I'm here in this work too is because there's not a lot of training in this for men.
For men, right?
The big messages out there in this world for men are slow down and make sure your woman has an orgasm
Right.
first.
Yeah.
Awesome. I get
Yeah.
it. Great.
Yeah.
And stop watching porn.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the two big conversations that are happening, you
Yeah.
know, and they're both a little bit, demeaning and
Mm.
like almost punishing, you know?
Mm.
So
Mhm.
I won't say that's the whole thing because I'm also seeing the other conversations around, hey, men, you know, you can actually reclaim your eros too. And
Mhm.
here's how. So I'm
Yeah.
developing a men's retreat that hopefully I'll be presenting towards the end of 2026 that
Nice.
isn't specifically about eros, but using what men need, the language that men use, and that's
Mm.
doing something physical, working together, challenges,
Yeah.
physical challenges, whether it's
Yeah.
climbing a mountain or kayaking a river or whatever, and using that and then the foundation of somatic work, the breath and the movement and the touch,
Mhm.
awareness to access that piece and
Yes.
learn that language for the same reasons. More
Yes.
me, more of us, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. I love the way you put that, and I'm so glad you're doing this work with men, and I love the way you're emphasizing, uh, in your work and in your response right now, presence, right? Like, really, this is about being able to stay and experience more sensation, and one of the things that I encounter with women a lot is a real upper limit when it comes to holding the pleasure we say that we want. And
Talk
so there's
about a bit
so
more.
it's one thing to desire, and a lot of women come to me not clear on what it is they really want. But a whole lot of women come to me perfectly clear on what they want.
Right.
And right? But what we experience is that there's a difference between the work of articulating and freeing up your desire, whether it's in the bedroom or out of it,
Mm,
and then having the capacity in the body to hold and sustain and actually experience what it is you say you want. And so another word for this is upper limits, right?
mm,
But how to expand our I'm not going to say pleasure capacity because there's no expanding the pleasure capacity without expanding the pain capacity. And by that I just mean,
right.
right, just sensation, how to drop beneath the story to the sensation. And that's what I hear in your response. Like really the answer to this question, w- my husband's upset, how can I explain to him where's the language? I need the language to give to help him or to help myself understand this call inside. But I think we all have that call. We all ultimately we sense that quickening at the heart of things and we want more of it. And that's I think that's what we're all searching for, and we call it all kinds of things like purpose, fulfillment, meaning, better sex. But I really think at the heart of it all is the same thing most of the time.
Mm. So the calling being that, that there is something else. There is more to this thing. Is that what I'm hearing?
More feeling. Yeah, it's more the more capacity for feeling and holding the whole of life's current that wants to be known through us, right? The trees outside, the weather, the pulsing of the earth, the cosmos itself, right? It wants to be loved by us as much as we want to be loved by it. It's aching to be known through us. And I think that's the whole point of our lives, is to come into right relationship with that ache on both sides, you
Mhm.
know? And right? And
Talk my language, woman, I tell you, this is,
right?
yeah, I can just feel that,
Right?
it's like, oh my God, there's
Yeah.
I don't know if, like, when I was a kid, I remember laying out in a field. This memory is really clear. Laying out in a field on my back, and the wind is just blowing, and you have the grass, kind of the dry grass rustling around your head, and the sky is just so blue and deep, and
Mhm.
this one little plane way up there that's going by, and I just, like, you know everything all of a sudden just went whoop and expanded, and and it's like, that's freaking magic.
Yes, right?
We're doing psychedelics, you know what I mean?
Right? Exactly. That is the ecstatic, would you say?
Oh
Isn't that
yeah,
ecstasy? Right?
absolutely,
That's ecstasy,
absolutely.
and it's right here. It's not in an altered state. It's right here. But we can't access it if we can't access the body.
Right.
That's it.
Well, and one of the things that you said somewhere in your website is, one of the messages is that you're not broken. And I say that to you, you're not broken. It's just that there's a bad programming. We got some layers of conditioning on on us, and our bodies are working perfectly fine. They just, we're reacting to some kind of a difficult situation, let's
Right.
say.
Yeah.
But um, how would you talk about that? Like, you're not broken. What is your
Yeah.
take on that?
Yeah, I love that question because for a long time I thought I was, and I know I'm not alone. I know you probably did too, and 98% of your
Mm.
listeners did too. So if you're watching this, listening to this, and feel like you're broken or wrestling with that, I have immense compassion. I have immense compassion for you. Um, and what I will say is that your arrival is by leaning right into that place. So let me say that, more clearly. Um, we pathologize pain in this culture, right? We make pain a problem. And then we create lots of industries, including the $4.5 billion industry of menopause, to rescue us from the pain that is a problem,
Mm.
which just keeps sending us down the path of further anesthetizing and distraction and short fixes, so that we never really learn how to be with the sensation that's asking to be felt so that it can release us, right? So we keep building more pain in the name of healing or dealing, and and eventually we break. Right, and by break, I mean eventually we develop an autoimmune disease or more than one. Eventually, something just typically often in midlife, something will rupture, whether it's physically, mentally, but we'll have a rupture. And and it is in that rupture, I think, that we start to really reckon with, like, "Oh my gosh, I'm broken. What's wrong with me?" And that can be a rupture that's, you know, like the manifestation of a lifelong story that there's something wrong with me, that we've just been outrunning or trying to for a really long time. My response to that is, if I were talking to a person, my response to that would be, sit with me. Sit with me and talk to me, and let me feel with you what feels so unbearable. Let me be with you and turn towards exactly the thing that you think is your greatest liability, the addicted part of you, right? That's often it, way deep down, right? So I've done a lot of work with addiction, people dealing with addictions. But like, what is the thing in you where your deepest shame resides? The thing that you think will just make you even more lovable if everybody knows about it. And then we start there because, the process of turning towards that place, we resist so desperately because we feel it is the evidence of our insufficiency, our absolute not enoughness and brokenness. That is exactly where, that's exactly where um, it all begins. And so if we can turn towards that place, and we often need support in this is the moment where we really need support, right? If we can turn and learn to move into that story and then into the sensation beneath that story and to the parts in the body where that shame resides. And instead of just thought working our way out of it, right, which doesn't work, right? We go into it and we just literally feel in our bodies. And this is it doesn't take just one session or whatever, but it's also remarkably alchemical. Like when we start to feel the feelings that through trauma or generally through trauma we have repressed and we've caught in the body, and we learn to safely move into and expand our capacity to feel that sensation, bit
Mhm.
by bit by bit. Um, that's the alchemy. That's the alchemy of pain into pleasure. Because what we do is we then my gosh, we step by step, our body becomes a field of our body's vocabulary grows. We learn to stay present to the very thing we thought we needed to reject, and that's the root of self-love. That's the root of self-presence. That's the root of self-acceptance and self-compassion, and that is the base of it all, right? And so, feeling and self-love are inextricable. Like the greatest form of love is attention, right? And so if we're cordoning off a big chunk of ourselves because we think we're broken,
Mhm.
we're in a chronic state of self-denial, not self-love. And so all of the work with Eros, it's inextricable from the work of healing, because the work of Eros is the work of peeling away and softening around the resistance we've learned to think of as self-protection and to find safety in a different way, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh.
To source safety through presence, not self-protection. And that is inviolable safety. And that's ecstasy.
I have a quick question for you. Would you be against seeing this podcast reach more people who could really benefit from it? If you're still listening, the chances are you've already received some valuable takeaways. Subscribing literally takes like 5 seconds, but it seriously helps us keep these conversations going. It's how we keep bringing in the guests whose stories provide the depth that you've come here for. So yes, I'm asking you to join the team. Hit subscribe, like, and share with somebody you know. And let's grow this thing together.
Well, and it's, again, I mean, I talk to a lot of people and I get asked a lot of different questions. And, one of the things, I think it was yesterday, I was in a conversation with somebody and they were saying, well, isn't it important that you learn how to love yourself? Self-love is the most important thing. But the way that you were explaining that, which, really dovetails with the way I look at things too, is that, you could go to, oh, I need to love myself and then bypass all of the
Mm,
icky stuff, the dark stuff, the painful stuff, right?
yeah,
And sort of like, I'm going to go off into my ecstasy bubble, into my happy place,
right.
and now I love myself,
Yeah,
but it will burble up again if you don't really take
totally.
care of it, guaranteed. I
100%. Oh, yeah.
and so that place where you can actually bring in, really sit with the pain.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
recently, I'm gonna bring up something a little personal,
Yeah.
'cause, you had a death in your family recently.
Yes, I did.
Part of your journey was with that grief, like, being with that grief, and
Oh,
I had,
yeah.
a similar journey, that as so I know where that is, but Yeah, that's another thing, that because I can see how your work helped you move through or are moving with this grief.
Yes.
And, grief to me is just something that it's like giving 3D depth to a 2D painting. The magic that makes that happen.
It's a great way to put it. Mhm. Mhm.
It's kind
Yeah.
of like that.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
And, I was having a conversation about this with a priestess sister the other day, and she's a really powerful medicine woman. I love her. And she's going through immense grief right now. Not a death, but the death of a marriage, a very long marriage, and betrayal, and just really acute grief. And she and I have been sharing a lot with one another how, you know, w- we don't wish these losses upon ourselves. Of course, I mean, it was my father who died, and my father was my hero and nicest man in the world, and just a phenomenal dad. Really lucky. I'll start crying. That's okay. um, and he died 2 months ago, and he had Alzheimer's. And for the last, I moved back to Maine. That's why I came to Maine. And I left Illinois and moved back to Maine just about exactly a year ago to really take care of him and help my mother and help him. And I put a lot on the back burner when I did that, whole lot. And I'm really glad I did. Um, but what this year gave me, to be with him, and you're right, like all this work that I've done with presence, embodiment, working through my own narratives of shame and brokenness, and finding healing, not in some sort of, positive self-talk, but in, which is helpful to a degree, but in a ever deepening capacity to be with myself no matter what it is I'm in, and to not abandon myself, to stay with myself with self-compassion, with it isn't the same thing as like condoning crappy behavior, right? It's the opposite. And so all of that practice gave me what I needed, I think, to really be with my dad in his acute dementia, to summon kind of exquisite patience when things felt incredibly burdensome and hard. Um, Also, in his death, I was so lucky and blessed to be able to be holding his hand when he died, in the very early pre-dawn moments. We To be with him in his active dying, to never leave his side, and then to keep his body, to hold his body for 5 hours after he died, despite, hospice and the funeral home and everybody saying, "Oh, we can get there in half an hour and take it away." And we're just like, "No." You
Wow.
know, we stayed with his body. We undressed him. We washed him, my mother and my sister and I. We anointed him. We placed herbs all around him. We sat with him. We brought the grandchildren in, and we sat with his body as it cooled. And that, you know, that was so beautiful. But if I had a story about pain and death and endings that made all of that a big problem, I wouldn't have done that. And so I feel incredibly gifted by that experience, but this is, to underscore, to reply, like, grief and eros are inextricable. Like you say, grief brings that 3D. Grief is, I was thinking before this call how or this session, how grief and, you know, like the throes of sexual ecstasy and the deepest moments of grief are actually so much alike. Right. I know that sounds weird, but because you are so taken,
Right.
right? You're so taken. It's like birth too, like giving birth. You're so taken.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, that's the French call it la petite muerte. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
orgasm. It is the little.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I love the way you put that. You are taken.
Mhm.
If you
Mhm.
put that resistance up, that let's take it away in half an hour and hide it, and not look at it, and um, that you miss the beauty.
Yeah.
You miss your body doesn't get to develop the patterning in there that lives for that lives in
Yes.
that is nourished
Mm.
by
It
that.
is nourished. It is nourished, right?
Exactly.
And I mean, like, all of my grief, I wear waterproof mascara now as a matter of habit because I cry every day multiple times. I just
Crazy big black, that rack.
which I don't mind at all. I cry in the grocery store. I cry, I just random places, and
Isn't that interesting?
I don't hide
And
it.
that's it'll just show up.
It does, it just
You know,
blindsides you. Yep,
it
just
just
yep. Mhm, and, I don't wanna stop it,
no.
sometimes I do, like, if I'm in a session or something, but, um but I don't, and, don't you feel like, and this is sort of cliched, but the tears of grief really are it's like those are the waters of new life, like, and when we repress them, when we don't allow ourselves to just let that grief take us and move through us, oh, our soil becomes anemic. Our soil becomes deprived, and that's the practice. That's the somatic practice of having a body that can hold that grief and stay and let it take us. Is it just love? It's just love, right? That's all grief is. It's love.
Yeah, the deeper the grief, it seems to me like the more you really loved and cared about that person.
Yeah.
It's I wanna I don't wanna change this subject, but I wanna bring it into, this place where we're talking about eros and sexuality and human connection.
Mm,
Mm,
mhm,
what has been sort of surfacing with this is that when we are with a lover, we'll just put it that way, so we're with a lover and we're exploring the eros of the moment. And the unfortunate part is that in our cultures, and I say this worldwide because it happens in almost every place I've ever been, and that we talked about it already. There's the secret place, the secrecy of it, or
mhm.
the privacy of it. Not that privacy is bad, but it just gets like nobody talks about it.
Right. The
There's
the shamey
threat,
sort of mhm,
shaming, even though it's the thing that makes everything happen, right?
mhm,
And if we can slow down with it, and I say this to men,
mm.
it's like you're
Yeah.
slowing down not for them, you're slowing down primarily for you so that you can feel the depth of
Yeah.
what's happening in your body, even if you don't understand it, you can feel it. And when
Mm,
you do that and you slow down enough and you pay attention enough, you do that language opens up. You learn the language and that whole act, which may or may not include penetration, right?
mhm, mhm.
Becomes kind of what we were talking about. Like it, makes a dude 2D and makes it a 3D. It
Yeah.
amplifies, it grows, it can,
Yes.
be that's 20 seconds of a hug all the way to 3 or 4 hours of love making.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
God, what are we missing when we just go like, bing, yeah, it's
Huh.
done.
Yeah.
Orgasm,
Mhm. Right.
bam,
Mhm.
they'll throw them in a casket. Yeah, it's done.
Right.
It's
Totally.
genius.
Yep. 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 Exactly. We miss it all, pretty much.
Oh,
Yeah, I love how you put that. It is slowing down, isn't it? I mean, that's the sort of header instruction for all of this. All the whole descent into the whole rise into Eros is
yeah.
slow down. Slow down. Um Slow down to hold more, slow down to be with it. And boy, I say that like as someone, I've got a lot of fire signs. I'm like, I've got a ton of energy. I drive really fast. I, you know, I,
No,
I can. It's always a good reminder. But yes, so in bed, your question was like in bed or wherever,
Oh, just yeah,
with a
in
with
Arrow.
a lover.
It wasn't
Um
really a question, it was more of like but
an
yeah.
observation, but yes, and I will just add that it just seems important, just technically speaking, sexually here. I know that part of your messaging to men is, that this it's the slowing down, not just for her. And so I don't want to de-emphasize that. It's really slowing down for you and what you will gain through this. And just a reminder to all of your audience members here that, a woman really does need more time to become fully aroused. And I think so many women, so many of us have like our whole culture has normalized a woman's arousal that's at about a third to a half of what it really can be by the time if penetration does happen or whatever else. Like, there's so much more your woman is capable of if you just take it slow. you know, and she might not even know that, but you can discover it together. Um, and a woman, we're both so attuned to one another's presence, right? Like, that's the beautiful thing about lovemaking is, words have their place inside of that space, but so often we're really speaking in the language of the earth, the original temple. We're speaking through the body. And so the more vocabulary we have in our body, the more sensation is available to us, the more we can share, the more we can tell each other, the more we can exchange, the more intimacy we have. And it can, yeah, that's the place.
And, there is that, right? Like men are they're fire and women are water. And, there's that, the slow boil and the don't burn out too fast and that kind of a thing. What I have felt within myself, and this is one of the reasons why I tell men to slow down, is because I don't feel that most men reach their own arousal potential.
Mm,
They might be rock hard. They might be ready to go at it. They might have a blazing orgasm or,
right.
ejaculation, but they have missed. And this took me a long time to find out
Mm,
through a lot of experimentation,
yeah.
you know, that there's like 80% of what is available gets
Mm,
missed. And part of that is through the messaging too, like where, men are hot. You are supposed to be erect, and
mhm.
if you're not, there's something wrong,
Right, right.
you're supposed to feel that passion, power, and that driving desire. And it's so much more than that,
Yeah.
so much more than that. But this isn't about men right now. We're talking about your
Well, but it is. It is about men. I mean, it's about all of us. I am. I mean, I work primarily with women. About a quarter of my clients are men. Um, and so but we exist in relationship, all of us, and all kinds of different relationships. Um, and so, I think it's perfectly, perfectly
well,
appropriate to talk about
part of
men.
what that is about too is that that you were talking about a solstice gathering that you're going to be doing, which is going to be over by the time this airs, and that's okay. But
Replay will be available on my
replay
website.
and there's always next year. Um, solstice happens every year. Going into that womb space, into that
That yeah, the fertile void.
the fertile void,
Yeah.
yes. And it to me, I find it to be, very much the same thing. But I would
Yeah.
actually like to hear more about what made you develop something like that, and also where do you feel like that can take people?
Mm,
You can
mm.
do that anytime, whether it's solstice or not, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I love working with I'm an animist, that's my devotional stance is, in deep reverence to all the live things, the stones, the trees, the trees are my dear, dear friends. Um, they're all of our friends. uh, so this deep hush, this dark winter time in the Northern Hemisphere right now, um, it's such a beautiful, beautiful, holy space, calls us into it. All of our bodies, right? We all feel it when we're maybe not down in Nicaragua, but when we're, the light is the days are getting shorter, and our bodies respond even if our culture is telling us to do something else, but our bodies know it, and I often think actually a lot of seasonal affective disorder is is the result of that schism, our bodies calling us inward, but our cultural narratives, not honoring those cycles. And so I think that, we are fundamentally in an embodied state of disintegrity. And I think that's often the source of depression or anxiety or both. Um, but anyway, so this ceremony, it's called eros in the fertile void. And the fertile void is the phrase coined by Fritz or Franz Perls, who was the founder of Gestalt therapy, he's a psychoanalyst. And he described the fertile void as that place between knowing and not knowing, that threshold moment where meaning making slides into being. So meaning making ceases and
Mm.
being emerges. And, we are so taught, back to our previous conversation, that anything dark, we can go into the whole racial thing about that too, but like
Right.
darkness and pain and all these things are problems to be solved, or at best, seasons to tolerate. And we see a lot of that language in the rhetoric of the new year, and everybody's inbox is filled with, vision board workshops, and, what are your goals? Let's do a goal setting workshop. And I know I sound really dismissive. I mean, I've done a lot of that, and I've led a lot of that, and it has its place, but I'm far more interested these days in the fertile void. I'm far more interested in what happens when we really surrender, the posture of deep surrender, the posture of really not knowing. And that isn't to say just like aimless inaction, just, you know, it's like a reverent, like stepping into the dark within, what we don't know. Maybe we're in a season of grief. Maybe a relationship has ended. A job is coming to an end. We have that deep inner sense that that we are in a season of completion, but we haven't maybe quite let go. Um, um, or maybe there's a pocket of truth inside that is really calling for our attention, that we are now summoning the courage to look at. But we all have these dark spaces, both within and without. And so my ceremony is all about not just pausing. I've often done ceremonies at this time of year called the sacred pause. But this year I'm like, no, this isn't about pausing from your life and then stepping back into it. This is about really facing the void, you know, where endings give way to a kind of emptiness and disorientation that asks for a new way of being. So so this ceremony is all about, through ritual and through different kind of, embodied practices and meditations and some journaling, it's about being with and resting in the not knowing and the dark, and noticing in ourselves the habitual the kind of habitual quest, like, okay, but the light's going to be coming soon, okay, like, noticing that, and
Right.
just loving it into silence, like just notice, and just like not answering that call, like leaning back even farther. And so I'm really excited. I can't tell you exactly where it's going to go because I haven't done it yet. And part of it is just letting the mystery take me. But yeah, and I think that that becomes useful for us, whether it's the solstice or not, because we're all facing, we all go through our seasonal cycles, whether they align with this particular the window of the solstice or not. We all come to endings. We lose people, we lose relationships, we lose religions, we lose places. And what do we do when we're standing on that threshold and we panic? Right? What do we do when it seems like the way forward is by finding the answer and having a map? Um, and I like to say to people all the time, you know, when you find yourself freaking out and trying to figure it out, stop and feel it in. Like, feel it in, because figuring it out ain't gonna work. Like, feel it in, which involves, that capacity again. It's such a deep practice of self-mastery to be in that liminal moment and trust that the answer will come, the decision will make you, if you can be with your body in that space long enough. And to me, the answers that come are far more miraculous and surprising in that space
Mm.
than the answers that come when I figure them out. And that's why I'm so seduced by the mystery. That's why surrender is far more interesting to me right now than, like, future fondling. Um, so
Uh, the seduction, the submission, and the fondling. I mean, we're on the right podcast here.
no.
Sorry, it just struck
Yeah, no, totally.
that and what is often talked about, this time of year also, and that the fertile void is, when you plant a seed, it's in the dark.
Exactly. It's
It's
the
not
womb.
it's not doing anything. There's
Yeah,
a
it's where all
lot
life is.
of stuff going on right there. It's
Yeah.
atomic energy. It's the Big Bang. It's everything that's happening in that little spot. And
Yeah,
just time to see what's gonna happen with that. And it is
totally. All life comes from the dark, right? All life comes from the dark.
right.
And I
Yeah.
love, like, one of the things when I do sacred pilgrimages to, like, Greece, for instance. I do an Eros retreat in Greece usually every year, and a lot of our work there is in caves, right? And going into the deep caves, the cave in near Delphi in Greece, where the less affluent and perhaps the more counterculture would go, while the statesmen and politicians would go to see the Oracle at Delphi. We've got these other throngs of people going up and doing ecstatic dance, mostly women, in the Crisian cave above Delphi. And there's like 35,000 knuckle bones that have been found there from divination. But I like the call of the cave is the call of the wisdom inside of the dark, and it's ancient ancient wisdom traditions throughout all cultures, in places where there were caves, which is most places. Knew that, right? And yeah, it's the fertile void.
Fertile void. And, we could probably talk for a long time on just the different anthropological evidence around, that kind of thing, whether it's burying rituals. There's
Yeah.
one part of Africa somewhere has a ritual where they bury you for 24 hours. That's part of you're actually
Alive?
ground. Yeah.
Oh boy. That is some mastery. Oh
Yeah,
my
or,
God.
you're very much entombed, and
Woo!
it's yeah,
Yeah. That's
and
wild.
then, somebody that I work with here does mask work, so they build a mask around you while
Mm,
you're going into this deep state. And some people can't do it because it's just
yeah.
that's the suffocation or being cut
Right.
off, the
Right.
sleep deprivation piece. But
Yeah.
I found that kind of work to be just like, oh my God, it really takes you into
Mm,
depth of who you are when you sit
mhm.
with that fertile
Oh,
voice.
yeah.
You said just, that's
Mhm.
great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love Fritz Pearl's work. Fritz Pearl. It's
Franz or Fritz. Yeah,
I
either one. Yeah.
I love his work. But speaking of the retreats there in Delphi and going into the caves and the women's sexuality, and this is something that you actually do have coming up
Mhm.
sometime in, where it is, I think you said February,
Yeah,
right?
the sex retreat is in March. It's over the
March.
spring equinox, which is pretty
Okay.
amazing because spring equinox is nature's new year. And it's in the Riviera Maya at this extraordinary sanctuary called Onzek Shpuha. And I bought out the whole place, which I think is really essential. I do that for almost all my retreats.
Right. Right.
But it's just this sumptuous jungle oasis 10 minutes from the beaches. It's really incredible.
Watch out, I might show up. That's
Yeah, it's really just incredible. It's limited to 12 women. I still have a handful of spots left. Um, and so hopefully by the time this airs, for anybody who's interested, hopefully there's a couple spots left. But yeah, it's an extraordinary experience. We move from, like, just a very, it's the beginning of the retreat is, how do we even relate to our sex? How do we relate to our vulvas? How do we relate to our bodies? One of the things we did last year is, like, what do you call her? It's just something as simple as that. And it was amazing to hear all the names, right? And then to rename ourselves. We do yoni steams. We do a lot to actually reacquaint ourselves with our bodies, because you probably wouldn't be surprised, but a lot of women just touch. A lot of women have learned how to be touched. A lot of women have a very difficult time touching lovingly their own bodies. Even women who consider themselves very sexual and very comfortable sexually often have a difficult time just touching their own bodies sensually. And so we start in these very practical, embodied ways, and we move through these gateways of healing and these gateways of expansion, and do all sorts of amazing somatic things like Mayan Temescal. We have
Mm.
a private underground cenote, which is just exquisite. So we do a lot of work with ancient waters, our own waters, the waters of the earth, the waters of the primordial womb, the sea, incredible body workers there. So we do great rebirthing breathwork ceremonies. Um, and then our final piece is moving into sacred contribution and really threading that line between sexual energy, which women have definitely reclaimed by the end of this retreat, which opens up inspiration, like creativity and inspiration. I watched women at last year's retreat just receive download after download. Women went home and started businesses. I mean, that through line from sexual energy to sacred contribution, that is the thing I am most passionate about in this life. And so that's what the sex retreat is about: sex,
Right.
because sex is so much more than sex. Right? So for women who feel stuck and you can't figure out why, come to the sex retreat. You'll find it out there
Yeah.
and you'll get unstuck. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
well, and part of the development of that, because we didn't really talk about this yet, kind of brushed through it, but part of what you do from reading your website, or what has informed your work, one is your own sense of not feeling fulfilled in what you were doing in your life.
Yeah.
Now sort of focusing or niching, if you will, towards women that are feeling something similar in their lives, whether
Yeah.
there's, and so I'd like to hear more about that development and then how that folds into the sex retreat.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. So I will say that, as a professor, I was deeply fulfilled for a long time. So I just want to make that clear. Like it wasn't like I was just on the wrong path. I was deeply fulfilled and I loved it for a long time. And then there's more, there's more. And I I subjected that little voice to a lot of inquiry. I sat with it. I journaled about it. I went to therapy about it. I coached about it. Like I really put it through the test. And despite or because of all that questioning, it survived, right? And I followed it. And so it wasn't that I wasn't fulfilled, but it's that I came to a cycle of completion with this particular iteration of my creative expression in life, which was academia and teaching in higher ed. And so moving organically, following that call for more, right? I I am where I am now. And it seemed to me like a very organic, natural unfolding and deepening. Um, One of the things I love, I love working with both men and women, but we'll talk about women here because that's what's going on at the retreat. Is so often women come to me with this deep restlessness inside, of any age, often women in midlife, but I have clients in their early 30s to their early 80s. Um, Often women will come to me with a deep restlessness, like this chronic hunger for more. And with that is a couple of things. Guilt, because often they are very successful. Often their life on the outside looks pretty darn good. And who am I to be complaining? What's wrong with me? There's so many people suffering. Why am I, I should be totally happy. So I'm a problem. My hunger is a problem. My hunger is a liability. It's an evidence of my ingratitude. Like, I just got to get my ass in shape. What's wrong? Right? That's one. And then there is the, am I just not satisfiable? If I
Mhm.
answer this call, am I just going to be here again in 5 months, 5 years? And sometimes I say, yeah, and thank God. Right? I mean, the path of eros is not a path of stasis. It's a path of expansion and evolution. And that's not a problem. That's the way of life itself with a capital L. And so very often, one of the things I like to say to my clients is, or people doing discovery calls or something like that with me, you can find a whole lot of coaches who will work with you to find contentment right where you are, who will approach your restlessness and your hunger as a mindset problem that needs to be solved. And I am not that coach. I am not that coach. I am the coach for women whose hungers survive their interrogation, right? And we start with that hunger. We start with that hunger as your lead, as your gold, as a glimmer, as a sparkle, not as a liability. And it's really that hunger. Through all the work I've done, I've come to the conclusion that that hunger it is the call of the mystic. It's a spiritual call. It's a call to be fully expressed in this life, which is
Mhm.
life longing to know itself through us. And so I often find that women who feel stuck, particularly at midlife, women who feel stuck and have tried all kinds of things, including coaches, um, often they've done all the things, but really look at their sexuality.
Yeah.
This is where the sex retreat comes in, because we, as going back to the very beginning of our conversation, we are taught that sex is reducible to the sex act. And what we're not taught is that sexual energy is creative life force energy. It's the furnace of our creative expression and our sacred contribution. We're not taught that sexual energy is the energy of the wind, the energy of song, the energy of the poem, the energy of lovemaking, energy of beautiful food. That's sexual energy. And when we can start to experience our own sexual energy as nourishing, deeply good, the source of like fertility in all spaces of life, oh my gosh, we open up channels of inspiration and courage that just transform our lives kind of quickly.
Yeah.
And so this is where I see a lot of like quantum leaping, timeline shifts. I mean, it doesn't have to be a grueling 10-year therapy process. It can be a 5-day experience where you weren't actually, taking ayahuasca or a combo or anything else. You're actually just turning right toward your sexual center and liberating her.
That is so amazing to, well, just that. First off, it's obvious you are a word crafter. And, that taking it all in, expanding that capacity and that place also where, yeah, people do the work. I experienced this for years, right? And
Yeah.
I
Right.
came with people for years and then it comes down to that one little place, the floor of the pelvis and sexuality, and the
Yeah.
genital, and all of a sudden, it's like, and,
Right.
liberating the body and it just, that whole bit feels like it just coalesces into this
Yeah.
little knot,
Right. So
and,
well put. Yes.
and
Yep.
then having the, will and the courage
Mm,
to sit with that and being well guided,
yeah.
uh, like, which I feel like you probably well guide people into that space,
Mm,
um,
yeah.
is, it's just such a valuable and needed service in this world.
Mm, yeah.
It's just definitely not enough of it, and so I'm glad you're out there doing this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, as we're kind of beginning to get to winding this down here, but there's a few things that come to mind. A couple of questions I want to ask you. That one is, if you were stripped of all your titles, your
Mm,
title and your academic title and your coaching title and mother and wife and the whole nine yards, right?
mm,
Some of that you were stripped of, I can understand. Who are you underneath all of that? Who is
mm,
Kirstin?
mm. Life. Just life. Just life that's shaped like this and speaks like this and sounds like this and moves like this. I'm life. I am, Walt Whitman, who is my great muse. He's my great patron saint, the poet Walt Whitman. He's, his great poem, his 590, I think it is, page poem that every publisher rejected. That's now the granddaddy of American poetry. Is called Song of Myself. And it's not called Song of Myself because he was some egomaniac. It's called Song of Myself because he was the greatest. I mean, it actually makes me cry to talk about him. He's the greatest mystic poet I've come across.
Mm.
And that includes Rumi and Rilke and all of them. And he said, I celebrate myself. I sing myself because every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. Right? And, he got it. He got that, like, when you right? When we are it's a great paradox of life. When we are the most fully expressed, we are the most in service to the whole. Are when we feel ourselves it is when we are most connected in oneness, which is that state of ecstasy, right? We're most conscious and embodied state of that sky above you, like laying in that field, right? Like when we're in that place and we feel that thrum of aliveness in us and around us, and we're part of this weave, we feel held, we feel guided, we're alive. We also, in that moment, know ourselves as this singular expression of life better than we ever do. Like, we know our gift. We know what we're here for. And I love that. So that interface between I am me and I am all, like, that's who I am
Mm.
without any titles, without any of that stuff.
Mm. The
I
leading edge,
hope. I
big
hope.
bang. Oh no, you are. I mean, there's not much more to say about that, because that is. I was going to ask you another question, but you answered it. What's turning you on right now, and you are so turned on. It's
Yeah,
just
this life. Yeah.
goes across the screen right now.
Mm.
But if you were to tell somebody, um, or give somebody like one step, one embodied step towards what you're describing right
Mm.
now, what might that be?
Breathe. Breathe. Take a deep breath. Let your exhale be long and slow. That's the first step. It's the first
Mm.
step. And then maybe a hand on your heart and a hand on your belly, and feeling that place that is tense. Can you soften around it and stop fighting it? Can you just soften around it? And the next time you meditate, and you're told to scan for tension, scan for pleasure instead.
Oh,
And what do you find?
yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. God, Kirsten. I mean, that's um, so much energy and love and ecstasy just wrapped up in those words. You're
Thank
sharing
you.
it.
Thank
Yeah, in that.
Yeah. Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, how are people going to find you, and how they're going to find out about this retreat coming up in March and the rest of the work that you do, which is fairly extensive, actually. Seems like.
2 places, yep, yep.
Yeah.
2 places, thanks for asking. So my website, kirstinhotellingzona.com, which is under big revision, and by the time this is out, my brand new site will be launched, which is awesome. So please visit me there. It's Modern Mystic, but it's kirstinhotellingzona.com. And I imagine you'll have that in your show notes, so people know how to spell my crazy name.
We
You
didn't
can
talk, but that's okay.
you can find me on Substack also, where I post my writings every week, and that is Modern Mystic. And then you can find me on Instagram. I have a fairly robust presence on Instagram as well. So all the links to all my things are in
Right down
Instagram.
there in the show notes.
Yep. And Instagram will be Kirstin Hotelling Zona Coaching. So you can find me there. Yep. So I'd love to have you visit. Yeah.
Excellent,
So
excellent.
thank you. Thank you, James.
Thank you so much, Kirsten, and, yeah, all the best with what's going into this season and the upcoming, um, workshop that you have coming up, and then,
Yeah.
yeah, I hope everybody here just dives into your work, women and men, but, there's a lot
I
of,
love working with men.
like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This was so fun. This is great.
I always say, like, I have the most amazing, guests, and I do. Is it just it fills my heart out to
Mm.
hear what fills your heart out.
Well,
So
thank you. Well, I've loved your other guests, and I'm honored to be among them. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.